Good morning, everyone, and I would like to thank you once again for taking the time to join us today for our live webcast in joint collaboration with Microsoft and Comparex. The focus for our webinar today is on better collaboration with your test teams using the tool Visual Studio. Microsoft will present and explore the key benefits of Visual Studio 2013, including some of the testing tool improvements of Visual Studio. Our reseller partner, Comparex, will present some of the benefits and special promotions currently on offer. I am proud to be joined today by a few of my colleagues. My colleague Peter Shave, our Global Alliance Director. Colin Beals is a developer tool technical specialist from Microsoft, and Tyrone, our product specialist from Comparex. I'll quickly go through the agenda. So the first part will be welcome and test house case studies presented by Peter. And Colin will present key features of VS 2013, including some demos, and promotions of Visual Studio 2013 licenses by Tyrone, and a few minutes of Q&A session. Before I pass you over to my colleague Peter, please feel free to type in your questions on your Q&A pod now or during the presentation. We will answer all or most of your questions if time permits. A full screen option is also available at the top of your screen if you need this, which might be quite useful when Colin does a few of his demos during the presentation. So without further delay, I now pass you over to my colleague Peter, who will present an overview of Test House. Peter?
Thank you, Mel, and welcome everyone to this our latest webinar where we share with you what we're doing with our partners and what we think will be of interest to the testing community generally. A little bit of background for you on Test House for those of you who haven't come across us before. We're an IT risk mitigation company. We've been focusing on that for the last 14 years. Everything we do is around performance, functionality, and security testing. We don't write software, and we don't get involved in any other kind of consulting. So it's a very narrow niche, but a very deep one. We're headquartered in London with additional full-service centers in India and UAE, and we have additional sales operations in the United States and throughout the Middle East. Our permanent headcount now is around the 200 mark, plus we have about another 400 associates dotted around the world who actually complement our teams as and when we may be short on particular skill sets at any given time. We're very proud to have been the first Visual Studio Inner Circle partner. We were approached by Microsoft in 2005, so we were there from the launch really in the UK, and we've been a gold partner since 2011. We are experts in Visual Studio 2013 and can offer you support across the whole range of services that you may be looking for. In terms of case studies, we have undertaken a number of projects, and the following three, I think, give you an overview of the benefits of working with Visual Studio. The first one, BMI, UK airline, that I'm sure most of you have heard of. They were looking at bringing the development of their online booking engine in-house. They had it outsourced and were finding that the company that was actually writing it for them were not as responsive as they'd like them to have been. So the BMI development team rewrote the site using Visual Studio 2010 Ultimate, and which offers powerful automation testing, and we were engaged to overall manage the project and to implement the automated testing. The benefits, as you can see there, a couple of very impressive quotes. The airline were actually advised it would take 6 months to build the website, but they completed it in 4, and they reckon they saved around 6 working days of testing per month for the pilot project. When the whole project was complete, they estimated that going forward it would save them something like 250 man days a year. That's a pretty impressive ROI. Emirates NBD, major bank in the UAE, they were spending too much time testing a core banking application. They tried to attempt implementation regression testing, but found the tool that they were using did not support the correct applets. The bank decided to manually test the menu structures within Finacle, but then started to look at other potential solutions. We actually sat down with them, and we actually decided that Visual Studio was the right tool to automate the tests. We could actually assist them in running those very effectively, The bank also leveraged the performance testing capabilities of Visual Studio to test their new Siebel CRM system. So today Team Foundation Server is used for all ALM at Emirates NBD, including source code control, defect management, testing and reporting. And as you can see, there's another very good quote from the customer there. This is another client in the Middle East, in Kuwait this time. A little bit shy on publicity. They don't like us to use their name, but they're happy for us to talk about the project. This was in the mobile testing space. What we're finding is mobile is probably our biggest growth area at the moment, and they wanted to give their customers 24-hour access to their accounts through a number of devices, in addition to giving people the ability to actually locate their nearest branch on their mobiles. We decided that the best tool to enable them to do this was the C-Test mobile automation tool, one of our other partners, and it's used widely across many banks. We then created links between C-Test and Coded UI Test with the required devices. This allowed the devices to be connected to a PC with C-Test installed, which in turn allowed for simulations of the screens on the PC. So Visual Studio 2013 could interact with this app using the full power of the MS tools. C-Test allowed recording of test scenarios and instantly converted these scenarios into C# MS test code. This code could then be copied and tested and pasted into a UI script, coded UI script. So while executing from VS 2013, the scenario could be played back in both the simulated screen and on the real device. The simulated screen by C-Test acts as an interface between Visual Studio 2013 and the real device and allowed on-device automation to be achieved. So a very valuable combination of tools there using Visual Studio 2013 and C-Test. So that's a little bit of a background on Test House and 3 recent case studies which I think prove the value of the tool. And at this stage, I'd like to hand over to Colin.
Thanks a lot, Peter. So morning, everyone. My job today is to kind of take you on a whirlwind tour through what's new in the Visual Studio 2013 toolset. I'm Colin Beals. I'm a Visual Studio technical specialist at Microsoft here in the UK. So let's get straight into it because I've got a lot of capabilities to get through today. So I'm going to start off just fundamentally into the IDE, where we've done a lot of work, starting with the user interface, making sure that we've improved our color and differentiation inside the development experience, making it easier to navigate around, particularly in the kind of light colors that Visual Studio defaults to. We've improved Team Explorer for particularly areas like pending changes and builds, where we got a lot of feedback that the panels here couldn't be popped out and extended and moved around the IDE to where users wanted, so you can now do that. Finally, the kind of IDE has become connected now. And by connected, I mean you can now log into the IDE, and this enables you, as you move across different machines that you may have access to with Visual Studio, to have your settings synchronize across these devices. So your preferences and choices of the way you want your workstation set up will go wherever you go as you log in. It also, of course, helps you log into online services like Azure or Team Foundation Service, now called Visual Studio Online. We've improved in the IDE things like the toolbars. I didn't think the toolbars could be sexy. I think there are certainly a lot more sexy feature now. They enable you to see various different annotations of your files, things like bookmarks, with a current cursor position, errors, breakpoints, which really, really help you navigate around your code in an easier way. We also have a map mode on top of the toolbar, which gives you a bird's eye view of your code, enabling you to get a good view of what it is that the area that you want to zoom into and actually potentially move to in the IDE. We've done some great improvements in terms of productivity around enabling you to have things like auto brace completion. So as you're typing a single brace or a bracket or a brace, we'll actually complete those for you. Quotes will complete for you as well. And of course, if you delete the starting brace, we'll delete the end one as well. Very similar to what you may well have seen in the web editor experience with starting and ending tags. We've also put some move line functionality in where you can move a single line or multiple lines up and down with the Alt cursor up and down key. Finally, in the IDE, we've decided to go into a definition of any object that you're wishing to view a lot easier and more contextual with the Alt F12 key. So the normal F12 key will go to definition. We now have a peak definition where we'll actually bring up a inline window of that definition inline in your code, meaning everything's very contextual and you don't have to zoom off to another window at any point in time. So for CodeLens, hopefully I'll be able to demo this for you, so I will whiz straight past the slide and share my screen with you where I can actually then show you this functionality. So hopefully you're looking at my screen right now, and I've gone full screen. So what we've got here is Visual Studio 2013, and actually I'll use a new feature to get where I want to in this instance. So I can do Control, comma, and then type create in here. This is a new thing that we call navigate to, which gives all of the create methods on various different files and objects that we've got. In this case, I want to look at the customer object. And the reason why I want to do this is to show you this thing called a code lens. And a code lens is this line here that you can see me highlighting. The code lens actually isn't a line of code in the IDE. You can see me stepping up and down. It will skip that line. Basically, this is a heads-up display of things that I can't tell about the code just by looking at it. So I can read the code, but I can't tell who calls this code. What other code calls this code? Whereas this two references shows me that two other things will call into this code that I have here. I can see details like how many unit tests actually touch this code. And in fact, in this instance, I can see that one of these unit tests is failing and one is passing. I can see historical data about this code, things like who was the last person to touch this code, so I can tell that Brian was the last person and two other people have been in this method at any point in time. And I can see, of course, that 4 changes are there in history for this code. The cool thing about these two final options around version control and looking at who's actually been in the code and the change sets that they've done is that if I had link integration, which I don't have on my virtual machine, I would see presence information for these colleagues of mine, and I would be able to instigate a link conversation with them. So I could, in context of Visual Studio, have a chat with Brian or Annie and see the code changes and talk about the code changes that they've made in this window. I'm going to pop back to my slides now. So I will just head back there and move swiftly on through the presentation. Other features that we've added to Visual Studio are around performance and diagnostics. We felt that we had a lot of tools in this area, so we collapsed these into a unified hub where we could place all performance and diagnostics tools all together, things like your profilers, all existing in one single place. And whilst putting it in one single place, we decided to make this contextual. So the type of application that you're running, we can display the performance and diagnostic tools that are available to you in this instance. And we've added a few new ones for different application types. And I'll talk a little bit more about those in a second when I talk about Windows 8.1 applications. We've improved in this hub as well the debugging scenarios. So things like memory dump analysis. We now can analyze a memory dump for .NET applications, enabling us to not just look at a period of time, but I can also look at a memory dump compared to a second memory dump, maybe a baseline. This helps to spot leaks of memory as we go through time in our application. We also have IntelliTrace performance indications. So if you're using the System Center monitoring agent, which you can use from System Center, or you can download separately from System Center on the Microsoft Download site, or is used in our Application Insight technology that I will talk about later. All of these will capture IntelliTrace performance indications, whereby we can spot where code may be slow and be able to debug into that further. In terms of Windows 8.1, we've done a bunch of work here to make coding easier for Windows Store apps. We've improved our XAML editor to include IntelliSense around data binding and resources. We've enabled more intelligent navigation, so the ability to flip between the code and the editor very, very easily and seamlessly, which was a big complaint area in previous versions of Visual Studio. We've increased the number of templates that are available when you start a new project in Visual Studio 2013 for Windows Store. One of the key ones being a hub application, which is one very similar to maybe something like the travel app that comes directly with Windows 8. We can now actually, out of the box, create an application very similar in style to this and get started in developing a very rich Windows 8.1 application. Finally, in terms of Windows 8 coding, we've integrated services like Windows Azure Mobile Services to enable you to do notification across a range of different mobile devices that you're working with. This enables you to use a service where you can, in a unified model, push notifications to iOS, Android, and Windows Phone in one seamless way, working through an Azure service to do this. In terms of Windows 8.1 applications, some of the performance extra additional functionality we put in here are things like a UI responsiveness analyzer, whereby you can look at your UI and see how responsive or non-responsive it is, and actually then work out where your problems are. Are they in rendering, the layout? Are you tying up your UI thread? And we've also looked at the energy consumption whilst you're executing your Windows 8.1 applications to work out how well you're utilizing the resources of a device. And of course, if you're writing for things like tablets and phones, this sort of energy consumption is really useful information to tell you how much of the power and battery you're going to be using, as you may well want to keep an eye on these metrics in addition to the usual performance type indicators. Finally, in an area, of course, Test House excel in, is coded UI support. We now enable you to write Windows 8.1 coded UI tests, so we can actually automate Windows Store apps and actually test those in an automated way, which previously wasn't possible. Moving on through development, and lots of different types of development to cover today. I'm going to head into web development, where we've added some new tools around ASP.NET. We've looked to unify ASP.NET. We recognize the fact that people are using various different types of ASP.NET project, like web forms, MVC, maybe web API. And we've enabled you to start new projects and actually pick one or many of these types of applications to bring together into one single ASP.NET application type. So no longer are you having to handcraft and merge different ASP.NET applications into one. From the get-go, we support these with new projects, enabling one simple way of utilizing ASP.NET Framework. So I'm going to again talk about browser link through demo and flip to my second demo of today. If I can share my screen. So I will share my desktop once again and flip to my virtual machine. Now in this instance, this application that I'm running is a web application. And actually, it's very easy within Visual Studio to launch from Internet Explorer. But we recognize that other browsers people will want to use and test against. And we look to enable you to pick other browsers other than Internet Explorer, in my instance, Firefox and Google Chrome, as you'll probably want to test your application against these. And once again, partnering with Test House, they do a great job at doing cross-browser testing whenever doing testing across your applications. But whilst you're in development, we're able to select these different browsers, click Browse, and you'll see this application launching in each of these different application types, each of these browser types that I selected. So I've got Firefox, Chrome, and IE all loaded up here. Now, of course, I'm running out of real estate a little bit on my workstation here, but one of the cool things that we can do is that we can make code changes to our application. So I can go into something like the views of this application, go find, let's say, a particular area of the app, like maybe where it says support in this application, so it says support here. I could change this to be something like Test House Webinar. And then I can click this button here of the Refresh Connected Browsers. So this is Browser Link. And it enables me to take these three browsers that I've got connected and actually then see the fact that it's in line, then change this particular code. It's a great way of very quickly, and you can see if I flip to Firefox and to Internet Explorer, we've got that same change replicated across all of these. So it enables cross-browser work to be a lot easier to do. Now, from any one of these browsers, I'll pick Chrome as an example. Another thing that you can do is use a tool that we call Web Essentials to actually look to actually interact with your application. And this uses the fact that underneath Browser Link, we have a connection between this application and Visual Studio. So there's always a connection between this browser and Visual Studio. So I can click into this, change a profile to be, I don't know, something like My Profile. And actually what's happening there is if I look back in Visual Studio, it's actually changing the code here to say My Profile. So it's a link between a browser and the code where you can actually edit as well in the browser, and that's all made available through Browser Link, the connectivity with this and that tooling. I will flip back to my presentation now and stop sharing and keep heading through here. So The next thing I'd like to talk about is the ALM capabilities that we have within the product. So we've enabling further use of the agile process or agile processes, whereby we now enable your work items to have some parentage above your product backlog items. Specifically, out of the box, we call these features. And this is for large agile teams or larger agile teams. You're often wanting to have a parent item that maybe doesn't fit into a single sprint and maybe is delivered across multiple teams. And so this feature enables you to manage a portfolio of work across a wider sort of spanning team and growing number of teams and manage it in a single uniform way. This feature relies upon Team Foundation Server to enable it. Another Team Foundation Server 2013 feature is the ability to do very simple charting on your work items through the web interface. And this makes it very flexible and easy to create these different charts around work that your teams are working on, and enable you to pin any one of these charts or any number of these charts to your project homepage so everyone can see these key metrics expanded out in a very simple way. As far as coding goes for Visual Studio, we've enabled Git support for version control as a distributed version control system. So the traditional Team Foundation Server version control hasn't gone away, but we've supplemented Team Foundation Server with the choice of picking the leading distributed version control system, which is called Git. And we enable through Git integration into Visual Studio, whereby we can actually use Visual Studio, talk to Git, and actually then commit our source code back to a central hub repository that sat inside Team Foundation Server or Visual Studio Online. It just gives further choice for developers as to where they want to store their code and the version control system that they wish to use. And now we feel that we've got a kind of best-of-breed centralized version control and best-of-breed distributed version control, giving our customers the option to pick any one of those systems. In terms of collaboration between your project teams, we've introduced something that we call a team room. And the team room really is a timeline of information that's happened for that team as it's gone through time. So as users interact with Team Foundation Server, they check in code, they work on work items, they complete builds, they do code reviews. All of these key types of interaction with TFS are actually then organized in a timeline view, very similar to kind of Yammer, a Yammer conversation or a Facebook timeline if you use Facebook, and view your project in that sort of timeline-centric way and what's happened. You can augment that with chat features where you can actually chat to your colleagues about within a team and have a contextual team discussion about anything within this team room. Finally, to collaborate, we through the web UI enable you to comment on on code that you've put checked into the source code repository. As far as testing capabilities go, we've introduced a couple of key new testing capabilities, the first of which is load testing in the cloud. For a long time, Visual Studio Ultimate has supported load testing, but one of the things that you need to do in a load test is supply hardware whereby that is used to actually drive the load onto your application. This is a great use of the cloud where we can use the elasticity of the cloud to actually say, well, these the infrastructure that we use to generate load, we can actually spin up on the fly using Windows Azure and actually have this then increase the amount of load on a pay-as-you-use basis, just as we would with any cloud service. This enables us through Visual Studio Ultimate to ramp up the load very quickly, and then when we finished doing our load tests, we stop paying for that load injection infrastructure. If you're doing load testing on a kind of a periodic basis, this makes it very cost effective to do load testing. And of course, you should speak to Test House if you're looking to do any load testing, as they've got some great skills within load testing in being able to work out the best ways to load test applications and actually then introduce this technology into your application, whereby then you can drive load at scale. In terms of other test capabilities, we've created a web-based interface whereby you can do your test case management. So in the past, we still have Test Manager, Microsoft Test Manager, to actually enable you to do your test case management. We now enable this through the web, and this is useful if you're using other platforms, and it's also just a really useful way within the tool to enable broader reach sometimes to people wanting to access and edit test cases and look at the test suites and test plans that have been put in place for your projects. Finally, the final area I want to talk about is DevOps. And developer operations, we've done a lot of work in. And the first thing that we've done work in is actually by acquiring another company to provide us with some release management capability, an area that Visual Studio and Team Foundation Server previously didn't really have any tooling to support us on. In this case, what Visual Studio Release Management looks to do is to enable you to create workflows that are consistent across the environments that you care about and do automated deployments to those, whilst enabling you to introduce a approval workflow as you move between these environments. And I've just got a slide here that I think helps to explain that a little bit better in terms of we enable you to automate a workflow and build up an automated workflow for the deployment of your application. In each of your environments, then, you get an audited trail and ability to do acceptance and validation and approval after the deployment has happened. Of course, once acceptance is done, the automated deployment will kick off. Then somebody can be chosen to validate and approve the fact that deployment went successfully. We've found this the uptake in this tooling has been absolutely mind-blowing for us in terms of customers wanting to do this, to integrate with their existing building system, whereby a build then will kick off a deployment into development, and then the downstream environments such as QA, pre-production, and then potentially all the way to production. We have some tooling to enable you to define these releases, and there's a whole new client through the release management client to define these. But it's a very simple and flexible tool that enables you to define the workflow that you have to actually automate the deployment of your applications. And you can use existing tools and scripts that you may well have in place to actually help you achieve that goal in an automated way. Finally, of course, as we go through that release management system, we audit all the traffic that goes through that system. So you've got a permanent, durable record of what went on, how the deployment was done, the login that was done at the time that you deployed, and the approvals that people did along the way, either before or after a deployment was achieved. The final area I think I want to talk about here in terms of DevOps is Visual Studio Application Insights, which is actually in preview at the moment, but it's a new area of Visual Studio Online and our features that we've added as online services for Visual Studio Online. What Visual Studio Application Insights is really about is being able to take production applications that are now out there in the wild and being used by customers, and to be able to reach into those applications and start to get better metrics about how those applications are used, if there are any problems like performance problems, and their availability. So are they always available? So just to kind of run through these in a little bit more detail. In terms of availability, we can use the Azure reach of our data centers in Azure to actually go and ping your application and run either a simple ping test or a web performance test against your application from any global location in our Azure data centers. We have 16 data centers that we can actually reach your application from. This enables us over time to get a really great view of the availability of your endpoints in your applications, either by a simple ping or a more in-depth end-to-end web performance test that actually does some sort of a useful interaction with your application, such as, I don't know, adding a product to a cart. Can you actually do that through the application, and how long does it take from any global position? As well as the availability data, we have usage data. So here we can actually monitor the usage of your application, how many users are coming into your application, what browsers are they using, what devices are they using if it's a more of a device-based application, what language are they using your application with, those sorts of things. And even things like loyalty of your users, how long before your customers come back, which of your pages are the most popular pages in your system. This enables you to start getting better learning about your application to then focus on future developments that are based on the true usage that your users are using in your application, rather than that kind of guesstimating how users are actually interacting with your applications. So that's another chart, so showing the region that traffic is coming from. Well, we find customers are actually using this for some really advanced scenarios now, whereby they can define their application to maybe do types of scenarios like A/B testing, where half the users go one way in the application, half the users go another way, and they can introduce a new capability into each of those different application types, and actually then monitor for a period of time which of those is better used by customers, and then obviously they make all users go with one of those types. So it enables you to try out different scenarios live in production and then actually get analytics on how those are used. We're also seeing customers do monitoring of user journeys through their applications. So for an example, if I was an insurance seller, I could see, when are my users trailing off through my new quote system, and is there a particular thing that we can do to encourage users in those areas where they normally drop out to not drop out and actually make it all the way through to making a product purchase. Finally, of course, we can monitor your events in your applications as they're sat in production. So we can look for exceptions, memory issues that we've got, performance issues using those IntelliTrace performance indicators that I mentioned earlier. And each of these events that are raised get raised with more information for developers then to do something with. So, for example, for an exception, they'll have an IntelliTrace log that they can then bring back down to pinpoint the line of code where that exception was actually raised. Similarly, we do the same for the performance problems. For memory tests, we create a memory dump that then can be brought into those memory dump analysis tools that I mentioned earlier in Visual Studio. So we're really starting to bring these operations, production systems back into development to enable the debugging and kind of a problem resolution process to become that much more seamless. And there's a screenshot of the IntelliTrace being able to be downloaded for an event that we've raised. So with that, I'd like to pass over to Tyrone now, who will take you through the licensing benefits and promotions from Comparex.
Thanks, Colin. Hi, everyone. I do apologize in advance if there is any background noise from my side. Okay, so let's take a quick walk through some of the licensing benefits and promotions around Visual Studio and MSDN. Okay. All right. So if you take a look at the slide that's shown at the moment with the MSDN licensing benefits, you'll see that there's a host of different benefits that are all associated with MSDN licensing that come part of the package whenever you purchase Visual Studio and MSDN through volume licensing. You need to be aware of that. If you don't purchase the licenses through the volume licensing avenue, these benefits may not apply. However, with all Visual Studio products and MSDN, Microsoft are able to offer you some benefits that are associated to that, just not the full bundle. Okay, so if we take a look here, we do have a variation of benefits that are associated to MSDN, such as the different Visual Studios from Team Foundation Server. You get the TFS user calls. You also have access to Office Professional Plus. Obviously, all of these are edition dependent. Then you have, with your MSDN subscription, you have software for deployment and testing. You also then have access to Windows Azure, which I'll cover in my next slide, as an additional benefit to MSDN. With that, you also get access to Windows, so that would be your Windows 8.1, as well as all of the Windows Server ranges. You also then have access to Microsoft SharePoint, Exchange Server, SQL Server, Office, Dynamics, and all of the other Microsoft servers that come along with those technologies. Then you do have Windows Phone developer accounts and Windows Store developer accounts that are associated to those MSDN benefits, which allow you to access a host of other resources that Microsoft make available to developers. Moving on to the next point, you also then have access to the Office 365 developer subscription, which provides you with additional resources associated with the cloud offerings. You also then have access to technical support incidents, priority support with MSDN and TechNet forums, should you need any additional assistance with any development work that you are undergoing. You also have access to your Microsoft e-learning collections, as well as the MSDN magazine, MSDN online chat, and special offers from partners such as ourselves at Comparex. Okay, so moving along to the next slide, I just want to briefly touch on the Azure offering that you get with MSDN subscriptions. So for every MSDN subscription that you purchase, you immediately have access to Windows Azure as an additional benefit in the background. Now, the benefit itself is not unlimited. However, you do get a certain quantity. So if you take a look at the slide, if you purchase the Professional Edition, you get $50 per month of Windows Azure time in the cloud, free of charge as part of that benefit. These benefits refresh every month. However, they do not accrue over a period of months if you do not use the full allocation. You will be given that set amount. So, for instance, $50 per month for that subscription. So you can use those Azure subscriptions however you feel. There is no limitation on what you can do with it, so you are free to explore Azure as much as possible. When you are going over and above those amounts, you do then get charged a little bit more from Microsoft. But then if you are using a large quantity of Azure, you can speak to partners such as ourselves, and we can then discuss all the variations and offers behind Azure to cater for your specific requirements. Okay, so moving along to the next point, and this is my final slide, so I like to keep it nice, short and sweet. At the moment, we have some license promotions that are running with Visual Studio and MSDN in partnership with Microsoft. So you have 35% discount on any test professional purchases. You also then have a 30% discount on all upgrades to Premium Edition. You also have a 30% discount on all upgrades to the Ultimate Editions. And then you also have a 30% discount on Visual Studio Release Management. Right. And that is all from me. And I'll just hand over to Mel for a bit of Q&A.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you, Peter, Colin, and Tyrone for your presentation today. As Tyrone says, we are now taking questions. So if you do have any questions that you wanted to ask Peter, Colin, or Tyrone, please do type them on your Q&A pod, as always. We will take just a couple of questions today, because I'm sure you guys want to move on for the rest of the day. So we'll take a couple, and then we'll take some of this offline. So I've got a few questions coming through. So first question, can I deploy a non.NET applications like Java? Colin, I think this is for you, sir.
Can you deploy? So I'm assuming that the question is around the release management tool that I spoke about and the deployment there. And absolutely, release management, whilst obviously it excels in deploying .NET code through your environments, absolutely you can deploy non.NET code and non-Microsoft code, even like Java. So basically from Java, you would end up with, at some point, your build would end up at some build drop, just like it would for .NET. Hopefully you've got some sort of build server in place. Therefore, release management picks up the code from that point and actually then instigates the deployment workflow that is required for that code to get live out onto the boxes in each of the environments that we talked about.
Perfect. Thank you, Colin. I've got another question. How do we get started with application insights? I think, Colin, that will be for you again, sir.
Okay. Again, this is probably because I mentioned that this was in preview at the moment. So application insights currently to date is in preview, but if you have a Visual Studio Online account, and if you don't have one, if you head to visualstudio.com and sign up there on visualstudio.com for a Visual Studio Online account, any account on Visual Studio Online, right on the home page, the front page has a Try Application Insights button on there. Now, at the moment, that will take you to a landing page whereby you can apply for a voucher code to get into the preview. They're normally taking about 1 to 2 days to actually respond to those and actually then give you your code for application insights. We're ramping up the amount of users that are being used there, obviously to general availability, which will be sometime shortly. And maybe if you're listening to this presentation on recording, maybe by that point the Try Application Insights just takes you directly to the getting started part. Once you're into the actual application insights, basically there's a bunch of different wizards that you can go through. So you tell it basically what type of application you've got, whether it be, I don't know, like a Windows Store application or a web app or a Java app. And we can then tell you these are the instructions, and they even put some neat little videos into those instructions of this is step-by-step how you get that application starting to instrument itself into application insights. And they're really simple to get started with. Really great new technology there.
Perfect. Thank you, Colin. I think that concludes our Q&A session for today. Before we close the webinar, the recording will be available within the next couple of days. I would expect it to be earliest Thursday and latest Friday. Before we go, again, if you do have any further questions you would like to ask presenters, Colin or Tyrone, please email them to us. Our details are there, and we will forward your queries to both presenters. Thank you once again, Peter, Colin, and Tyrone, for your valuable presentation today. Did you guys want to say anything before we conclude or summarize the presentation?
No, thank you very much, everyone, for attending today.
Yeah, thank you to everyone that was able to make the webinar. It's most appreciated.
Thank you, guys, and thank you very much once again for joining us this morning, and hope to see you all once again at our next webinar. Goodbye.